Hey, it's me, Vicky Marie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world we're living in. So, in today's video, or in this video, I'm going to be carrying on where I left off today. The Preston Davey, monster dad stuff, as I'm calling it, because the more we find out about these two guys, well, let's have a look at Preston himself first. This is the little guy that's the important thing. This little boy needs a voice. He only got to 13 months old and then he died in quite a brutal way. That is what the trial is about. Was it accidental or was it deliberate? Had little Preston suffered terrible abuse before he had passed from this world? He was only these adopted parents, Jamie and John, who were in the process of adopting him. He sustained away by Varley and GF, the two dads. No, we never hurt him. No, I have no idea. The accusatory way of, especially Jamie Varley, how he spoke to the police as if it was the police's fault that this baby had died. Nothing to do with him. No, he'd been in his care. He's a very cocky individual. Like, he's a drama queen. He's like screaming for his mum at the hospital. He's nearly 40 years old. And since he's been, this is the defense where we are at the moment. And he's made all sorts of reasons he's given for all those terrible injuries to little Preston. It was the hospital's fault. It's everybody's fault. And all the people that say he said such and such, they're all wrong. They're either lying or they don't remember properly. He's had time since his first interviews where he had the short dark hair. He's had time to recover and think about his story. Now he's got the nice long hair, facial hair, blonde streaks. Yeah, took advantage of the time after Preston had gone to change his look completely. Sort of thing you do, don't you, when you've just lost a child or a child that was in your. We can't call him his dad really because he'd only had him before. One of these monster dads, and it's his defence at the moment. He gave evidence in his defence, and of course the news is that I'll be telling you this morning. John is going to take the stand as well today. So, of course, what I'll be reading you out from are the what happened in court yesterday after I had finished. And it was a very, very hectic day, so I didn't have a chance to finish off what happened. So I'm hoping to actually, come on and follow the court proceedings as they happen. Now, this is the Manchester Evening News that I'm getting my information from. Must all reporters know about. They're just giving their account of there are no cameras in the courtroom. No, you're not allowed to record. So we literally are looking at John. He's such a cutie, he really is. But in the eyes, well, allegedly, knows of these two monsters. So, allegedly, and not only allegedly, because he take video of it. He tormented little, didn't he? When bored, it was like, oh, let's see how he responds to this, let's do that. It was just like, he's so sadistic, even if you take away the sex side of things. So sadistic the way he treated this baby. He should never, ever have been given a chance to adopt a baby. I can't believe this poor little thing. Anyway, so the social services are at fault as well. I'm going to read out to you what the Manchester Evening News had to say about what happened yesterday in courts, and just be aware that this is what the reporter says. So we are sort of beholden, if you like, to their impression of how the court went. So we just have to bear that in mind. The other thing we have to bear in mind is discretion, because this is upsetting. The whole thing has been upsetting. But you know what? This little boy, he deserves to have a voice. Don't happen. This hasn't happened. And then Preston just gets lost. It's like he never existed in the first place. Well, he did exist. And he was entitled, like everybody else is, to be, have a life. And he didn't get one, or he got 13 months, 4 months of which he was being tortured and probably abused by these monster dads. So it's very sad. So people need to know that these sort of things happen. And we can't shy away from it. We can't turn our face away from this. That's the way I'm looking at it at the moment. So I'm going to follow it right through to the end. And I want to please share this video, because as usual, YouTube just has sort of limited ads on every single video that I've done about Preston. So the problem with that is it means it's just ironic, really, isn't it? All the things you can say and do on YouTube, but you can't bring attention to what happened to a little baby that was abused by his carers. Anyway, never mind. It won't stop me doing it. I'll carry on doing it. But it does help if you share, because that, or hype if you get an opportunity to hype the video. Thank you to those who have. Just anything really to get this story out there. So hello to Replay Crew. Thank you for watching. I know quite often I have to do these videos early in the morning, so we get quite a lot of Replay Crew. Thank you. And thank you to my members. Thank you to those who sent Ko-fis, etc. I've got some new merchandise that I'm going to be putting on my Ko-fi page about the merchandise. Doesn't seem appropriate talking about it while we're talking about Preston's case. So, shall we go? We're going to start off from where we finished yesterday. And it's ironic because the person who was testifying yesterday is the forensic specialist, and he has contested, predictably, some of the things that the prosecution, the forensics, etc., that the prosecution brought forward. Predictably, this guy has challenged some as we get into this testimony. I'm not sure what good this guy has done for Jamie and John's case, because although alternative explanations, let's say, to some of the injuries that Preston, forensic pathologist, and the doctors have said is true, it's possibly true as well, and some things are definitely true. So although he has challenged the cause of death, because remember Alison Armour, she said the cause of death, and this was agreed by the prosecution, she said that the cause of death for this little Preston was obstruction of his airway caused by an object being placed in his mouth, basically. And bear in mind, he has bruising. He had bruising in the back of the throat, so it's a hot. Listen, you're going to hear some very upsetting things in this video, or reading. It's hard to go in because you cannot believe how inhumane somebody can be to a little bee. I'd say 13 months old. What's wrong with these people? How could you? You've got to be pretty nasty piece of work, haven't you? Hi, Lily. Good morning. So just to warn you of that. So, of course, because it's the friend, we are again going to get details of Preston's injuries, and it is distressing. So just to warn you of that, be aware of it. I know not everyone can even read or listen about this case. I understand that. But I still think it's important. So, okay, so let's have a look. So as I say, Manchester Evening News, and we got as far, they had a little break, and they came back to talk about the Professor Crane he's a retired forensic specialist. He was he was the head of forensics in Northern Ireland, apparently. So he's now referring to an area of bruising to the bladder wall, which he says indicates an injury to the bladder. Now, sorry, I've got to have my vape. I mean, this hasn't even got any nicotine in. I wish it did at the moment. These are very distressing injuries, just to tell you. We haven't actually heard about these properly. So Professor Crane says that while somewhat unlikely, Mr. Kennedy was asked whether it could have been caused by compression of the abdomen. Sinister Jamie said, I've got to think of some names for him. What a horrible man he is. What a horrible man. Anyway, he tried to say that he had rubbed the baby's body because he thought that Preston, remember he calls him little one most of the time, rather than, or he hardly ever uses Preston's name, or even the new name that they gave him, Elijah. It's little one this, little one that. Anyway, he said he rubbed his stomach to try and get like a tube of to try and get the water out of him, because his claim is that Preston drowned in the bath because he left him in the bath, according to him, to go and have a shower. Just what you do to a 13-month-old baby, isn't it? Leave it in the bath, go and have a shower. And when he came back, Preston was lying face down in the water. This is what Sinister Jamie, that's not a good enough name. Vicious Varley, maybe I should call him. This is what Vicious Varley says. You know, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. You know, if you're out there and you remember, put your Pinocchios up. You need a lot of Pinocchio emojis for this case, that's for sure. But that's what he said happened. So, you know, but of course there was no evidence of drowning. So Mr. Kennedy, who's the QC, asked whether it could have been caused by compression of the abdomen. And Professor Crane said, while somewhat unlikely, he doesn't believe it could be excluded. It would involve forceful compression, pushing on the abdomen, so the bladder was pressed against the spine. And he accepts, trigger warning, he accepts that another possible explanation is an object being inserted into the bottom. What a horror. Now, we don't know that that's what he did, but, and again, in itself, you know, he's innocent till proven guilty, but in itself, you know, there's no proof that we've got no real evidence. We have got real evidence, but you know what I'm saying. We've not got any 100% evidence of what exactly happened to little Preston, because ascertain. And this forensic scientist said that's how that's the cause of death he would have given, unascertained. So he challenged a little bit the cause of death that was given by Alison Armour when she declared it was, you know, obstruction to the throat, obstruction to the airway to the throat. This guy says he would not have come to that conclusion. He would have said it's unascertained. Anyway, he explains that in babies and young children, the bladder sits high and it doesn't have as much protection from the pelvic bones as in older children and adults. Therefore, it is more vulnerable to injury, he says. So, can occur from passing a hard stool. However, a greater number of injuries could indicate sex abuse. Dr. Armour carried out a post-mortem in which she identified an injury to the anal wall. However, Professor Crane says he is not convinced he can identify this injury. He said there was no unequivocal evidence of injuries in life ante-mortem. He says that some of the findings could have been from some examination, and he says there is evidence of some bruising. So he's sort of half agreeing, half not agreeing. Thank you, Lily, for the Pinocchios. He's sort of half agreeing, half disagreeing. Professor Crane says the processing of sections is fraught with difficulties. He says care must be taken, concluding that defects are caused by injury or could have been caused by processing the sample. The witness refers to a photo which the prosecution say is evidence of a previous sex on Preston. He says it could be consistent, but there are difficulties with the way the photo was taken, which could distort the picture. The bite mark on Preston's bottom, he says it could be a bite mark, but he cannot rule out that it was caused in another way. So basically, this guy is there to cast doubt, isn't he? So these two twonks have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This guy is there to create a reasonable doubt, isn't he? So basically, there's a lot you'll see as we go along. There's a lot of things he agrees with are possible. Do these expert, because he's retired now, he's not a forensic pathologist anymore. Will he get paid for this? Do you get paid? Are you just expected to do it through your civic duty? Don't know. They're both J's, aren't we? We've got Jamie. So we've got. Anyway, I'm going to think of some good names. So John GF. His lawyer is this Anne White, and she is now going to cross-examine on his behalf, because the other guy that was cross-examining, she asked about the fracture to Preston's arm, which in Professor Crane's view had to result from a rotational force. Now, he did say that the fractures Preston, he had 41 injuries, I think it was over 40 anyway. And one of the testimony changed on what happened to Preston's arm. He told other people other things, though he now says he didn't. No, he didn't say that. You know, he's now sort of making them out to be liars, or language barrier problems, or just they not remembering it happened. He fell out of the toy box seat, getting him out the car seat. He came up with all sorts of reasons. The high chair, and John caught it was John's fault. You know. Anyway, you get they're so full of lies. These two, the gruesome twosome, so full of lies that it's hard to distinguish between when they're lying and when they're telling the truth. And then they just throw every view had to result from a rotational force. He confirms either the limb or the trunk would have to be rotated. So in this case, he is agreeing that it must have been a deliberate act, not accidental. It's very difficult for a baby to fracture their arm. You know, how would they do it? Came back, the prosecution now are cross-examining Professor Crane and Mr. Wright. Remember Mr. Wright is that Peter Wright, he is the prosecution barrister. He will now cross-examine Professor Crane on behalf of the prosecution. So the only person out of all these forensic experts, the only one that actually examined Preston's body, little body, how distressing that must be. I know it's their job, but I still think, you know, you're going to go home and remember that you've done a post-mortem on a baby, aren't you? And the only one who actually examined Preston in person was Alison Armour. All the others are basing their, including this guy, are basing their findings on, photos, images, images and samples taken at the autopsy to reach his conclusion. Professor Crane was not present during the autopsy and was not able to see Preston or examine any suspected areas of injury. So he is reliant on photos and images rather than actually. Professor Crane Helmer's findings. Simmons' conclusion found no natural cause, no issue with the cause of death being acute upper airways obstruction. Dr. Giff no issue with the cause of death recorded by Dr. Armour based on the autopsy findings or the interpretation of injuries in life. And Professor Freeman and Dr. Anavarapu's report about the mechanism as to how the fracture to Preston's elbow may have been caused. And the witness agrees that these were the conclusions drawn by these experts. The issue is unascertained with, but the cause of death is the main contention, where he's saying it should have been unascertained. He's not saying it wasn't obstruction to the airways, not saying that at all. What he's saying is he couldn't say definitively that that's what it was. Mr. Wright then asks about the injuries to the head, the torso, the mouth, and the lip, of which Dr. Armour and Dr. Gifford expressed opinions in terms of the mechanism by which they. So remember, Professor Crane said they may have been consistent during this process. Bruising. Poor little Preston. And Mr. Wright asks, are they consistent with Preston being subjected shortly before his death to the forceful taking hold of his head, arm, upper body and insertion of a hard, smooth object deep into his throat? And Professor Crane says, yes. The witness says there was a bruise to the baby's bladder. It may be explained by compression of the bladder against the spine. So it's just the internally, there were findings consistent with trauma through sex abuse, and Professor Crane says it could be. So I think that's the main thing we can take away from Professor Crane's evidence is, although he's trying to say there is a possibility it was some other reason, it's still possible there is the reasons that the prosecution witnesses put forward. It definitely wasn't that, but what he's trying to represent is could have been that, but also could have been this. And that's the best that this. So Mr. Wright says, you are of the view there may be other explanations for the various injuries holistically, not therefore to consider them entirely individually or singularly. Yes, we know the injuries I have asked you about are all injuries that must have been sustained at or shortly before death. Yes. We also know, in terms of any injury, of an alternative explanation for a specific injury. Yes, that's correct. So basically, at first when I started reading his testimony and that, I thought, oh my God, but you know, when you look at it as a whole and as it carries on now, saying it is, in fact, he's confident that it very well could be. But what he's saying is it's possible, though, that it was other reasons. So Mr. Wright Casey refers to the bruising at the back of the throat. He says they are extensive. Professor Crane says he wouldn't say they are extensive. However, he agrees they cross the midline and merge. Mr. Wright says the alteration of pharyngeal bruising experience, and the witness says, I did not say that. He did say that, actually. I remember he said that. He said that if somebody wasn't experienced enough and they inserted the laryngoscope, you know, in an inexpert manner, he did say that. He said that could have caused the bruising. Now he's saying he didn't say that. Mr. Wright continues, experts, Dr. Armour, Dr. Aubrey and Dr. Givett all say the expert insertion of the laryngoscope is unlikely to have caused any such bruising. Of course, the other thing we must remember is Preston wouldn't have bruised possible. The blade, even if inexpertly inserted, could result in bruising to the pharynx. I have to defer to Dr. Aubrey, who carried out the procedure. I'm not saying it was done inexpertly or forcibly. No, but you did try and cast shade on it. Professor Crane agrees it's uncommon to find injuries of this nature caused by a laryngoscope during intubation. Well, there's your answer right there. It's not as if it's a common thing then. So he's saying, oh, it possibly could have been. But where's the history? Where's the examples of it? Mr. Wright also asks about the removal of vomit from the throat. He says there was no suggestion that the suction equipment was abrasion. Professor Crane agrees. Mr. Wright asks about further injuries and suggests so far we don't have any injuries which are not consistent with the mechanism we suggest. In fact, all of them are wholly consistent. They are consistent with quite quickly. Mr. Wright says the samples taken at post-mortem are consistent with sex assault And Professor Crane says he had some difficulty determining the presence of injuries to the baby's bottom. Well, don't forget he's working from images as well. But if those injuries were present, they would be consistent with the mechanism suggested by the prosecution. Agreeing with the prosecution theories of how these injuries were caused to Preston. So, I expect the two, the gruesome twosome sat there listening to this and must have been thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, this is not helping us at all. He agrees that Preston had no history of constipation, and he in fact did have a history of loose stools. So on May the 11th, Professor Crane produced a joint statement with Dr. Alison Armour. Now, this is what they do agree on. Both pathologists agreed there was no evidence of natural disease to account for the death of this child. And Mr. Wright says Professor Crane raised no issue per airways obstruction. However, the witness says he has no issue that was the cause of death she was given. Mr. Wright says this is not qualified and there are no other explanations put forward. That's the the prosecutor. You raise no issue with the cause of death given by Dr. Armour of upper airways explanation. So why is he creating an issue now? Then if he didn't then, why is he saying he doesn't agree with it now? Anyway, the statement says that Professor Crane is of the view that upper airways there's no evidence the child died from drowning, so that's one thing they agree about. This little baby did not drown, and that's what Vicious Barley said. Yeah, I was having a shower, putting conditioner on my hair, and I left the baby, the 13-month-old baby that who was entrusted to my care. I just left him in the bath just because I needed to have a shower. And then when I came back, I was only gone a few minutes. I only conditioned my hair. And when I came back, he was lying face down in the bath. Fancy that. That's this. But there was no water in Preston's lungs. Preston's hair was not wet. In fact, Jamie's hair was not wet. See, now he's supposed to have conditioned his hair. So the likelihood is that this represents an unnatural death, says the prosecutor. And he says children don't routinely simply collapse and die, do they? And Professor Crane says, no, they don't. Professor Crane agrees that the pathological findings did not indicate drowning and there were no signs of this at the autopsy. But he still tells the court he would give the cause of death as unascertained. And Mr. Wright says, even on your findings, something traumatic happened to this child in the 24 to 48 hours prior to death by virtue of the acute inflammatory cells found on the histology. And Professor Crane says, yes. So, really, once he's pushed by the prosecution, he's agreeing with the prosecution, really. Anyway, Professor Crane, referring to the fact it was consistent with non-accidental injury, Professor Crane agreed it was unlikely to be accidental in nature So basically, he's saying all the same things as Alice and Armour, but he's qualifying it with a unlikely to be accidental, whereas she said it was consistent with non-accidental. So it's semantics, isn't it? It's but phrasing it in different ways. Hi, Louise. He's just qualifying it a bit, sort of making it a little bit more blurry, but he's basically saying the same thing. So he said it was unlikely to be accidental. He says if there was unintentional rough handling of the child, that could have caused the injury. So he's saying it could have been unintentional. So Mr. Wright says, this is not the sort of injury that arises from the ordinary level of care and handling of a child, is it? And the witness replies, no. It is not who may have been mobile. It requires a degree of force that is outwith the ordinary levels of any sort of force or pressure that may be applied by a caring parent to a child. Well, I think one thing we do know for sure after this trial is Vicious Farley is not a caring parent. To leave your child in the bath for 14 minutes and video them, to put them in the spinning cups and spin them around so fast their eyes are like rocked back in their head. It's not normal, it's not caring. To let them poo in the bath and then actually hold up their legs so that you get a better view for the camera. To leave them hanging over the side of the cot with blue lips and dribbling from the mouth. Of resuscitation right there and then. These aren't if you're a caring parent. And again, let's not forget they all happened in 4 months. If Preston, it's horrible to think, but if Preston hadn't have died that day, how much abuse would it still be in front of him? Years probably. It's almost, and I think you'll know exactly what I mean. It's almost good that he died because he got out of that situation. I mean, it would have been better if he would have been taken away from a loving family, but at least he's not suffering anymore. They made him suffer 4 months in their care. Look at all the suffering that he had to endure. How long would that have gone on for? If now we're a couple, he'd still be being abused, wouldn't he? It would be unusual, I agree, he said. I've explained the mechanism by which that could occur if the child was lifted solely by the arm. Mr. Wright asked about lying a child down in the cot. Only if the child was being held by the arm alone. I indicated there would have to be rotation. So as opposed to the parent or carer releasing their grip to prevent overextension, Mr. Wright says, yes, Professor Kane agrees. Oh, now these slaps to the thigh, these are very distressing because to leave a mark, I think to slap a baby so hard that you actually leave marks is, you just can't get your head around it, can you? So Professor Crane agrees that the marks to Preston's thigh were consistent with his slap. Shortly before death, this child was subject to some kind of non-accidental injury that led to five linear bruises to the front of the thigh. So, sorry, I'm just going to put this on my phone so I can keep an eye on the chat at the same time as, it's like 5 linear bruises. How hard have you got to hit someone, especially, to cause a bruise? It's not, you know, it's not, it's not, it's not, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I've never really, let me just turn this down. I'm a bit speechless about it because you just think to hit a baby so hard that you're going to cause 5 linear bruises. You just can't get your head around it, can you? Well, I can't anyway. So Professor Crane agrees that marks to Preston's thigh were consistent with a slap. Shortly before death, this child was subject to some kind of non-accidental injury that led to 5 linear bruises to the front of the thigh. Yes, Professor Kane says. So he's agreeing with that finding, even though technically he is, for the defense. He is agreeing with that assessment. Mr. Wright asked, did you consider that injury could inform you something about the way this child could have sustained injuries to the back of the throat? No, the witness replies. Mr. Wright now refers to bruising found at the autopsy, which Dr. Armour and Dr. recover Preston's heartbeat twice, I believe, when they were working on him at the hospital. But what Dr. Armour and Dr. Gifford said was that this would not be a sufficient recovery of blood circulation to cause bruises. But Professor Crane says that is not my view. I was specifically referring to the bruising to the pharynx, that's the throat. It was Dr. Armour's view this couldn't have occurred during the resuscitation process. And Mr. Wright confirms the witness said the temporary return of circulation would go to the more central parts of the body. However, Professor Crane says the bruising to the pharynx if resuscitation is the explanation for the return of circulation, which is capable of explaining the absence of it on the chest, asked Mr. Wright, it would appear efforts were made both prior to and on admission of firm pressure to the chest. There were no bruises to the chest. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? How is that consistent with what you put forward in this case? So although they had attempted CPR, there were no bruises on Preston's chest. Why? Because he was dead. That baby was dead before they took him to the hospital. They said he was floppy. He wasn't floppy, he was dead. And they only took him to the hospital in the end because they realised he was dead. And they tried to work on him. Not only, apparently, Vicious Farley was working on him in the car on the way to the hospital. No bruises. And then the hospital staff worked on him, CPR. No bruises. Back of the throat, bruises. Strange, isn't it? Oh, I hope the jury's taking note of it all. I'm sure they are. It would appear efforts were made both prior to and on admission of firm pressure to the chest for CPR. There were no bruises to the chest. How is that consistent with what you put forward in this case? And then here we've got a load of blah, 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 de blah from Professor Crane. You do not necessarily get bruising to the chest during cardiac massage. It does not always happen, and it is not always present. Mr. Wright says there is no bruising at the sites of surgical intervention, no bruising to the chest. So the only bruising is at the back of the throat and like the places where sex assault might have happened. What I said was the small bruises to the scalp could be consistent with the scalp being forcibly held during resuscitation. No, because he was already dead. Listen, I'm not even a forensic examiner, but even I know that. The bruising to the pharynx could be the laryngoscope, and the bruising under the chin could be consistent with the mask being held to the face. So that's what he said. And then the prosecutor says, or the child being abused? And he says, yes. So basically, this guy, he's not saying it couldn't have been sex abuse. He's just trying to put over an alternative. Because that's what, well, I don't know if he's being paid but that's what his job is. Because he's the defence expert. Just shows you can get an expert to say anything you want. Sometimes I wonder what the value is of these experts, because you get one expert saying one thing, another expert something completely different. So what is a layperson supposed to believe? You know, we don't know. The jury there, they're not forensic experts, so they're going to be, I mean, to me, it still seems as clear as day, because whereas with the other the defence witness just trying to create a little bit of doubt, because, you know, it is the defence's job, I suppose, at the end of the day. They are there to create reasonable doubt, aren't they? So it'd be interesting to see what the jury make of all this. So what else did he say? So then Mr. Kennedy for Mr. Varley, so this is him. He has a few questions to clarify the evidence. He asks, when you formed your opinion about the cause of death, did you consider the injuries and features holistically or individually? And Professor Crane says, in respect of the cause of death, one has to consider just law influenced by other findings. So again, we have to remember that, you know, whoever the journalist is who's there for the Manchester Evening News, they're just giving their best account of what's happening, but they definitely have not mentioned this before in this summary of the Manchester Evening News. Near miss drowning. So he said, in drowning, the person's face is submerged in water, and you may find changes to the face and nasal passages. However, in near miss drowning, they without showing near miss drowning. Honestly, are you confused? I mean, you know, what is that? Becomes hypoxic because the brain isn't getting enough oxygen. If they have lost consciousness, the gag reflex might be diminished or absent. And if they vomit, the risk is they aspirate stomach contents into the lungs. No, of course, none of this would have happened if let's suppose if we give Vicious Varley the benefit of the doubt and think, oh, he was telling the truth. Why did he leave him in the bath on his own in the first place to go and have a shower? Don't forget another messages he was sending to his partner John. It was like, oh, you get home here now because I can't have a shower until you come home. But on this day, he just jumped in the shower and conditioned his hair. Didn't send John a nasty message saying get home. Pinocchios again. Oh, I can't do them on my phone. I'm not. Never mind. If you can do Pinocchios, do some Pinocchios, please. So, if the airway is obstructed, breathe, and that's why anaesthetists will inside. And that concludes the evidence from Professor Crane and the end of Vicious Varley's defence case. And then the trial was adjourned for the day at 15:41 UK time. The jury was sent home and the trial will resume today. John will, I've got to think of a name for him because it'd be interesting to see his evidence, because thank you, Lily, for the Pinocchios. It'd be interesting to hear his evidence because he's the one. Initially, I wasn't sure if he was guilty in the same way that Varley is, but so it'd be interesting to hear what he said. I wish I could see them. As I say, I wish I could see them speak. That's it. It's interesting. It was more interesting to watch him. I can't think of giving too much information, etc. Oh yeah, we did that, and we put little one down and little one this and little one that. I tell you, if he starts calling him little one all the way through his testimony, that's it for me. He's definitely just as guilty as the other one, in my opinion. This is obviously turning into quite a long trial, and that's good because you do feel that Preston is getting heard, if you like, in his own way. So this is John Power in the background. This couple, they had money. They must have looked like, when they first sort of applied for adoption, I suppose, they must have looked like a promising couple. They're in an established, secure. Don't forget, Jamie Varley was head of year at a high school, a respectable job. John is a salesperson, seems to travel all over the place in his job. That's what Varley doesn't like. When John is away anywhere, Varley doesn't like it. That's when he sent his drama queen messages. Get home here now. I can't have a shower until you come home. Oh, but on the day that Preston died, he got in the shower, and not only got in the shower, because if he desperately needed a shower, I can't imagine why. But there are a few things you could do. You could put your baby in the cot so that they can't, they're safe with the bars around them. Something I used to do a lot with my son when he was a baby is you put him in their car seat, strap him into their car seat, take him into the bathroom with you. don't mean into the shower, but just sit them there so you can see them as you're having a shower. Is put it in the bath while you have a shower, just with water. Just wouldn't do it, would you? It's all lies. Everything Varley says is lies. So yeah, anyone it's difficult dealing with children when you're trying to do babies. Well, I say it's difficult. It's actually easier with babies than it is with toddlers, because with a baby of Preston's age, you can put them in a car seat and take him into the bathroom with you, and put baby gets to be a proper toddler. They keep referring to him as a toddler. He wasn't a toddler because he wasn't walking. He was crawling, so he was not a toddler. But once you get to be a toddler, that's even more complicated, because then they're quite agile, aren't they? And even, what would you do bathroom door so they couldn't get out of there? Just how would you, that, you've got to wait till they sleep and then you have your shower. You can't just, having a baby is about, you have to change your lifestyle. You can't live your lifestyle like you used to live it before. Can't believe they didn't know that, because Varley, he had lots of nieces and nephews. So it makes, I'm still not sure about, if I was his brother or sister, I'd be thinking, oh God, when did we leave our kids with him? Anyway, so John is going to give evidence. John, yeah, jilted John. Well, he was jilted for 2 weeks, or they were both jilted, weren't they? So let's not forget that apparently after this horrible incident where Preston died, to live with, it's also the testimony. That's a testimony that Varley gave. They didn't speak for 2 weeks, but then they started speaking again, and now they are back in an established relationship. So that's the other thing, because if it was all Varley, who'd done all these awful things and took these videos and all the horrible things that he's done. Look at him smiling there. You just want to poke him in the eyes, don't you? He'll be back with him, would you? Just not. That's how it feels to me anyway. That's how it feels to me. So that's what hopefully later on today, I've got classes this morning, I've got to take my son to work and things, but then I can cook, and I'm hoping to, barring, never know what's going to end on today's events in this case, which will be very interesting, because we're going to hear from John, the other partner, the other monster dad. Whatever happens, even if they're not found guilty of federal sex abuse, baby, is still, they're still horrible people, in my opinion. I just wonder what Varley's mum is thinking of all this. So just a few hours before this little baby died, she was looking after him, and she's dying. A few hours later, this little baby was dead, and that little baby is ostensibly her feels. I wonder how she feels about her bloody baby son, who was screaming for his mum at the emergency department. Mum, want my mum, even though he's nearly 40 years old. I think that says a lot about Val. He's a child in his head, isn't he? I think a lot of people that do are quite infantile in their head. You know, like the games he was playing with Preston. Oh yeah, just thought it was funny that he was playing with his genitals. Oh, he was trumping in the back. Actually said that in court. This is the head of your teacher, and he's in court, and he, you know, just awful men. Hi, Julie. Yeah, thank you for the Pinocchio. Yeah, both of them. But it'd be interesting to see what John's got to say today, isn't it? But just he's so childish, Jamie Varley. You know, what is he like? Has been indulged, spoiled all his life on it. It's very dramatic. I do think John is the calmer one. John could be the nasty because he could be the one that's more devious, etc. Oh, thank you for the candle for Preston, bless him. Yeah. And then like it's like sometimes in life you get people like, you know, they just are. And but when two bad people get together, like Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, you know, they talk about this folie à deux, don't they? You know, madness for there's Homolka and can't remember the guy's name in Canada. You know, and you get like a couple of couples, and then like that. This is not a homophobic case. This it could be, I say, Brady and Hindley and Brady. Hamalka, I can't remember his name. Two bad people together. When you get two bad people together, you know, it makes you wonder about Ian Brady. Like, see, would he have killed? Get these kids. She managed to get the kids into the car and those kinds of things to do. And that was the same with Malka and the Barbie killers, Ken Barbie killers. Sometimes the woman facilitates the kidnapping. Oh, look at decided to start with. It's been quite good today, the computer, but it's just started to whirring again. So I'm going to go, but I'll be back later. Thank you for caring about this little angel. I will see you in the next video really soon. Take care, and may your God go with you. Thank you. Oh, and don't forget to like, subscribe, all those things. Notification bell.